And welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Chuck. And here we are with the man himself. How are you, sir?
As the great Jeff Tucker would say on a regular basis, and I've taken it from him, tried to work on making sense of it in my head better than I deserve. And like for a long time, like I was like, oh, that's really clever, and it's like, blessed beyond measure, like immense amounts of gratitude. Life is so very good compared to how bad it could be. Sure, it could always be better, but man, the depths of depravity and hell mean that it could always be far, far worse. Like, oh, you lost your legs and you're in a wheelchair? Yeah. Well, at least you got a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And at least you and your wheelchair aren't in the middle of the desert. So, like, it's just, it can always be way worse. But like, that's hard because, so we had talked a little bit about, like, self-limiting belief stuff last week, and like, so that's a thing that, like, better than I deserve. I'm like, well, do I not deserve to be as good as I am? Because that is a thing I struggle with, right? And like, I was thinking about that yesterday. I know that this is a big rambling tangent. We've got other stuff to talk about, but I feel like there's some elements in this that do cross paths. So I posted a reel on Instagram the other day that wasn't fitness related. That's like a whole thing that we can talk about. And it was like the engine of a newer car to me, but it's not a new car at this point anymore. And nor was it new when I got it. It was, it is a pre-owned or used car, as they say, but it was a very specific thing that I'd wanted for a very, very long time, but like still hadn't really deliberately told very many people in my entire life, publicly or privately about it whatsoever. Really, Tony, Drew, and then I got a group of guys that I went to high school with. And like, that was really about it, besides Vanessa. And, going back where we began, better than I deserve. And like, that's it. It's like this weird mental hang-up that, like, I don't deserve a nice thing. It's like that I don't deserve something that makes me happy for me, that doesn't have more utility for, like, my wife or my son. Well, if it makes me a happier version of myself, it makes me a better version of myself, why isn't that deserved? So anyway, better than I have been in the past and not as good as I'm going to be in the future. That's how I'm doing right now.
I like that. That's perfect. And, the sign behind you, as I said on a call yesterday, is perfect for you. Good vibes only. That's been perfect for your backdrop for your call. So that's been really good. I thought today I really wanted to get to know you on, our paths have crossed for a long time now. And we've chatted about a lot of things. And I know just even as a casual observer of your Insta, family is very important to you, particularly your nuclear family that you have with Vanessa and Liam. And just interesting to me to see that we might bounce around today your journey into being a dad, because I know that that's something really important to you and that you take great, pride in building that relationship with Liam. So,
I
going
hope you're
from
prepared to do plenty of like editing out, just like maybe weird, gross crying. I love it. I fucking love being a dad.
And that is totally reflected. Like, I think Vanessa shared a reel the other day that she'd found on your phone of a montage you've put together of just, stuff with the little dude, or, when you shared him doing some of the, gymnastics movements and he's like having a blast. And it's just like I'm sitting on the other side of the planet watching that, and it makes me smile. And it's like sometimes you see stuff on Instagram, you're like totally manufactured, totally, whatever, and people have got their filtered life. And I'm like, this is Chuck building a fort in the lounge room with Liam. Here's the guy who's guiding me on my business journey, and he's underneath blankets and towels in a fort in the lounge room with his little fella, which is like, I don't feel like if I was being mentored, say, by Tony Robbins, that I'm necessarily going to see him do that. He may well do that. But it's, knowing you as I do in a professional level and building personal layers on that, but just seeing, where you came from in your start, how you evolved through CrossFit, and, you didn't have the smoothest path through life early on, even, as I said, a casual observer, and then you've come to become this well-rounded human now that can give, Liam these opportunities to be a better human himself. So it's a big bundle of stuff there.
So mostly just ramble about being a dad. Is that the ask?
Yeah. Like, how, yeah. I mean, is that something you always wanted to be?
No, and so that was really the specific conversation that I was reflecting on as I was driving over here, thinking about just a lot of what we talk about in affiliate calls with owners, and just into the general nature of like coaching and trying to be a helpful human to other humans. That generally the greatest things that hold us back are fear, like predominantly, like for almost all of us, right? Like it really is fear that is primarily the thing that stops us from like reaching into and towards our greatness. I think that's like most people would associate with that. Like, yeah, unfortunately, like that is true. Like I can bemoan my circumstance, my network, and my resources, and like my time and my money, and like bullshit. It's like, well, even with what you have, you're not sending it nearly as hard as you could, and that's like universally, literally everybody. Because even look at like crazy levels of success, like Grant Cardone, Elon Musk, and they're like, I should have set bigger goals. I should have tried harder sooner. And you're like, oh no, what does that mean for me? And so anyway, where I'm going with all of that is for a very, very long time, I didn't think that being a dad was an appropriate place for I had an enormous amount of fear and anxiety around that I would be destined to fail in that role, and that like I wasn't responsible enough, and I wasn't the man that I would need to be the father that I would want a kid to have. So backstory that like probably created and shaped a lot of that is what I have told people through the vast majority of my entire life is, born in Colorado, grew up in Florida. Everybody knows that. Not everybody, but predominantly people that know me know that. And what predicated that was my biological parents having a fairly ugly divorce and separation. And up until really just a handful of weeks ago, the time frame that I had framed for that was that I was 4. It's like, around when I was 4, we moved to Florida, and that's really where I grew up from 4 to 18. And I joined the military and blah, 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 blah. I hadn't seen my biological father for the last 10 years. The last time that we had seen each other was at he had come to Vanessa and I's wedding, which was 10 years ago. And that was really just for a handful of days in the middle of a wedding that is a destination wedding where everybody's traveling to. Like, you're not getting a lot of deep bonding and milestone moments. It's really just like in passing, and weddings are crazy, chaotic, and blah, blah, blah. Prior to that, so that was 2000. So just saw him recently, a few weeks ago. Saw him in 2012 for our wedding. Prior to that, had seen him in 2009 for like a little family get together with really his side of the family that I didn't have really a lot of relationships or know growing up, and that was his first wife and my half brother and half sister, who are both significantly older than me. And then previous to that, had an ex-girlfriend who I was with prior to Vanessa. She had actually searched him out online and reached out to him and said that, like, hey, Chuck's got some issues, Chuck's got some baggage, and like I think that really like you guys owe it to one another to like create some opportunity to be in one of those lives. I don't know that was the actual conversation, but like that's really kind of what came about out of it, and then gave me like maybe the best worst surprise that like somebody in an intimate relationship could give you is like, oh yeah, we're going up, we were in Sarasota, Florida, which is about halfway down the Gulf Coast, and then we went up about 45 minutes north to Tampa. And she's like, hey, I got a surprise for you. We're going up to Tampa, and you're going to see somebody that you haven't seen in a long time. I was like, interesting, cool. I've lived in a ton of places. I was in the military. I've been all over. And I was like, okay, neat, whatever. We'll see what this is. Lo and behold, it was my dad. And that would have been 2007 or 2008. Somewhere in that time frame. So it was 2008. I know that for sure. So 2008 is when I reconnected with him as an adult. 2009 is when we had like our first more significant time together. And then saw him for a couple days in 2012. And then really a few weeks ago, flew him out to Texas, or he flew out to Texas because he hadn't seen us in forever, but really had never gotten a chance to know me as like a man, really as his son. We separated so early on, and I've got a lot of things to work through with him and my mom about why that wasn't a relationship that was reconnected or reinforced anyway. And that was really hard for me to manage and deal with. That he ended up having a really close connected relationship with his first children. Jeremy and Diane, my half brother and sister, like he's been a consistent, constant fixture in their lives, their whole lives.
Yep.
And then I was kind of this odd man out as like the youngest child that never even got to really know his dad. And so obviously there's like a lot of issues and baggage and stories and bullshit there, and not knowing like what the truth was. In the absence of the truth in life, it's easy to fabricate falsities in the dark, right? And there's two sides to every story, then there's also the truth.
Yep.
And so, like, I had my whole life, I grew up with my mom's version of the separation and the divorce. And then, more recently, really just got exposed to my dad's version of it, like, literally, a couple of hands worth of fingers of days ago. And so because of how that was all framed from my mother for, like, the vast majority of my life about a lot of the negative attributes and characters of my dad, it's like, ooh, if I don't know the answer for nature and nurture, as far as developing a human, I at least know that, like, on the nature side, that is not a good set of habits and behaviors genetically, like, for me in that role. And then also, like, the nurture side, like, well, I didn't really have him growing up, and I think it's, like, objectively pretty reasonable. Like, I've ended up in a pretty good place, and I think better than a whole lot of people that probably even came from some better situations. It sounds like, well, I didn't really have it from nature or nurture, so I don't really have any skills or tool sets, and I might be starting it off on the wrong foot. And like I was worried that it would do a lot more harm than good, and I know how much I have suffered through my life because of issues that center around like not having what I needed out of a father figure, especially like really early on, and I didn't want to risk fucking somebody else up in the way that I felt like I was fucked up. That was like a really, really big part of it. And then I was actually at the same coffee shop a few days ago meeting with another dad talking about just like some fatherhood stuff. And he's working through some things with his dad, but a line that he had used with his father that helped him find a little bit of peace was, "Hey dad, like, who taught you how to be a dad?" And then he got to learn a little bit of the backstory of like his dad really didn't have a dad, and his dad was also 18 when he had him, and so he's a kid with a kid trying to figure all of it out with nothing to model and like no idea. And at 18, like you don't have the awareness and the foresight and the growth to be like, hey, I would like to grab coffee with somebody who is aspirational as a father and figure out if I can like life hack this a little bit. Can I collapse time? Like, can I be a better person in that role faster? Like, dude, at 18, there's no way I would have done any of those things. At 18, I hadn't even been in jail yet. I hadn't been to inpatient, outpatient, anger management. So yeah, like, well, like that was a lot of it too. It's like, so in that gap of like my early life where a lot of those childhood struggles built into like, you can struggle as a child, and unless you do something catastrophic, like it's really not that bad. But if you carry all that baggage and bullshit into adult life, like your ability to create severe consequences is far, far greater. And so that was, there ended up being a very dark period of my life. There's been a few of them, but, like one notable one was divorce from my first wife, got a DUI, kicked out of the military, inpatient, outpatient, anger management, jail, like the whole shit. And so like having those formative beliefs of like, the nature is bad. I don't have the nurture. I have a lot of evidence that like I am for sure not the dude to be a shining, sterling example of what a father could be and should be. Like fear was a huge piece of it. That for a very long time I was like, I don't think that I'm going to have kids. I don't think that I'm the type of person who has kids. And then it became like a regular, consistent conversation with Vanessa and I. Like you get an itch, like in a sense, and that is probably for a lot of people a very like hardwired evolutionary piece, like
you're like
and good on it, right? Because otherwise like the show wouldn't have gone on. But
We're here to
No,
survive.
man, I did not always know
Mm,
that I wanted to be a dad, and for a huge period of my life, I thought very deliberately the best thing for myself, that unborn boy or girl, and like the universe at large is like, hey, I'm not the kind of person that needs to be replicated again in the world. Like,
mm,
I've believed for huge stretches of my life, and still fight with it at times, that like the world would be better off if I were not a part of it.
mm,
I've gone through like suicidal ideation stuff. As far back as I can remember, for sure,
mm,
like super crystallized thoughts of suicide. Really early on, even like middle school, late elementary
yeah,
school. Like that's
mm,
been a really hard thing for me to deal with. And so, yeah, there's been a lot that for a long time it did not seem like the signs of the universe pointed to like, no man, you should be a
no,
dad.
you should
It's
just
like, oh
go
well,
forth and
you're gonna
procreate.
be a well, and like I also, not that this is atypical in any way, but like I held myself some weird assigned piece of like blame and guilt for my parents' divorce. And like, how can you not, right? Especially when you're a
Yep.
kid and you can't contextualize it. You're like, well, here's a ton of pictures of you guys together doing cool
Mm.
stuff, and you're very happy. And now I'm here, and now
And that's
you
not.
guys are no longer a thing. And so, like, I love Vanessa like deeply, dearly. Vanessa she is my
Mm,
rock. She is,
yeah.
as much as I love Liam, Vanessa is the best thing that's ever happened to me, because without her, there wouldn't be him.
Mm,
And so, like, that was a piece of it too. It's like, man, we've got a good thing. Like, does
yep.
that get compromised if we have a kid? Like, is the kid the thing that
Mm,
stress tests all of the worst pieces of me and like breaks the whole thing? And then congratulations, like you created another broken family. You
yeah.
created another broken kid. Um, and I'm really lucky that I haven't killed myself to this point. I've had like a couple really close moments.
Yep.
Well,
But
and I
I
guess
think,
if like part of the aim of this is like to die without secrets, last May I almost shot myself in the head.
well,
Most people don't know that; only a couple people
mm,
do. But like, there's a bullet hole in the ceiling at the house that I just finally pulled a ladder out and patched a few weeks ago, because like I needed
mm,
some closure on it.
yep.
But I'm endlessly, grateful and thankful that I've never made that like altered, stupid, fucking selfish, shitty decision. Like that is a
Yep.
piece of me that I fight with still to this day on a regular basis.
Mm. It's
So
a
yeah, I know. Despite how it might, appear on the internet that like I built my entire like identity around always wanting to be a dad,
yeah.
I didn't know that it was the thing that I belonged in. I was not like the vessel for all of those qualities. And so
Mm.
what got me like thinking about relating it to the original piece of the conversation, fear, is, man, how many times does the universe have to prove to us that fear only keeps us on the wrong side of everything that's better?
Yep.
Like
And
both
we've talked about,
opening and closing the gym, like both,
yep.
like it's just all of it.
As
So
humans,
fear's an interesting mechanism.
and that's what we were saying not long ago. Like, as humans, we're wired for the negative to protect us, but sometimes that actually stops us taking a step and moving forward with things. And it's
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
we definitely have a huge bias to like paying attention to negativity. I mean, we talked
Oh,
about that a ton last week.
for sure. And I really liked your. It's interesting. Your self awareness, where you're like, I don't want to pass these same patterns and behaviors onto another little human. And I distinctly remember as a growing up, and I remember that because I had a very traumatic, I guess, for want of a better word, relationship with my father, and was very, very hard on me as a kid. And I always remember saying, well, if I have a child, I'm not going to, I need to be aware. I had the self awareness, like, you did, you didn't want to bring certain things across, is that if I had a child that was involved in golf, which was my big passion, then I couldn't necessarily be involved with them because I knew that I might have a tendency to push the way that I'd been done. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to put anyone else through that. And I would go fully supportive, but I would have to consciously just step back from that a little bit in case I had that tendency that had been, that's the way that I'd learned, growing up. So that was always a big awareness. So it's interesting that you had that awareness as well of of some of those things that you're like, well, I don't want to do the things that were done to me in the way that it was done to me, and didn't have a lesson or a plan moving forward, like a guidebook saying, oh, well, I've seen this done before. This is how I, can do it. So I guess if we fast forward and then, so you and Ness decide, we're going to have a little human, that moment that you find out that she's pregnant and you're like, okay, this is happening. How do you get past your fears and anxiety at that moment and go, we're on the train now. It's coming. It's that moment that crystallizes like, oh, this is a thing now. This is an actual happening, not a theory anymore.
So I will have to find it for you. Hold on, I'm trying to see if you froze. I'm trying to see if I can get you back because I got audio. I don't know if you have me or not.
Yeah, I've got you.
So I've actually got a video of her telling me that she was pregnant. And it was back when we owned the gym, and it was on Father's Day, which there was zero correlation at that point. And we were driving in the car together, as you often do with your life partner. But we used to do a video series when we were in the car together, either like going to or from the gym, and we just called it Conversations. And it was really just like, conversations in the car about things that were related to, lifestyle, goals, fitness, just all of the things that were very centric to, a gym owner life and lifestyle. And it was incredible value for our clients. And they were fun to do. So anyway, we were shooting this video, and she had a little gift for me. I was like, oh, that's cool.
That's nice.
And it was like a little dumbbell rattle. Yeah. And it took me a second. I was like, what am I gonna do with this? This is super tiny. It's like what is this? A toy? Is it a joke? And then it hit me. She's like, pregnant.
Yeah.
And so that was really the moment that I found out that she was pregnant, but it didn't become super crystallized, like you said, oh wow, this is really happening. It was when we had our first ultrasound. When you hear a heartbeat, at least for us, that was the moment. It was like, oh,
I think that's true for a lot of guys.
It's a person.
Yeah. They hear that heartbeat.
That was kind of the announcements, and that was when it became very, very real.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And so I guess then at that point, everything kind of triggers, well, how do I do this thing? And how do I, I've got 9 months to figure this, out a little bit, I guess.
So having, at least found at that stage in my life, I had become a better version of myself, right? In the time in CrossFit and fitness and, owning multiple businesses and just kind of going further down the path, was in a better place that I could wrap my head around it, where it wasn't so crazy and dark and scary to even think about, that it became a thing that we could, really think about with some positivity and excitement. It is scary because it can't not be scary.
Yep.
Because predominantly, outside of past trauma, a lot of fear is just specifically centered around the unknown. If we know that we have a negative attention bias, whenever we come into a situation that we don't know, it's way easier for us to think about all the things that could go wrong, all the downsides, everything negative or bad that could come out of it, rather than everything awesome and positive that we could move into.
It's definitely a big thing where you're like, okay, now I'm not just we can just pick up and we can go wherever we want. We've actually got this little being now that, relies on us for every aspect of their life. Particularly in the very initial stages, it's like we can't just be about us anymore.
Yeah. I mean, for sure.
Mm.
It's yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if it's been helpful or hurtful, but like we have been able to always like reframe in our minds like just how far humanity and technology have moved us. And, like, for huge amounts of all of human time, like families were fairly like nomadic and pretty much just like consistently and constantly had a lot of variability and like disruption. Like not that it's not really fucking nice to have consistency and like homeostasis and stability, but like, you know, we're built to have some variability in it. And so like,
Yep.
you know, even for Vanessa and I with Liam, you know, we moved from Sarasota to Austin, and then even within Austin, we've already moved 3 times. And like, so I would venture to guess that most 4.5-year-old kids haven't, you know, gone through 4 moves in a lifetime at that point.
Yep.
But we had the stability in the way that mattered. And like, you're always going to find somewhere to sleep.
Yep.
Because if you need to, you can sleep on the ground if you're tired enough. And like,
yep.
You'll find something to eat. Because if you really need to, like, you can steal it, you can kill it.
Yep.
And like, you know, those are really exaggerated examples, but like, we had the family, we had the thing that like I could rely on, like lean into. We had the solidarity piece of it, but like that solved for everything else and made it like it's almost not consequential. Like if Vanessa was like, "Hey, I think we should move to Utah," I'd be like, "Okay." Like it just wouldn't even cross my mind. And so I think how a lot of people, how at least in their own lives, they build their frameworks of like stability and consistency around a lot of more tangible, material, objective things. The things that matter to me are like always in like they're always in the ether. And like we've got love, we've got security in our relationships, and like we give each other attention.
Yep.
And those are the pieces that I didn't have for a long time in the way that I needed them. So nothing else really matters. And nothing still really matters to this day. Yeah, like if I've got them.
And I think that's a really good foundation. You know, moving, you know, particularly for Liam, you know, at his age, is understanding that life is ever changing, like through moving or whatever, helps him get a sense of, you know, resilience and understanding that, you know, I think in life when people have, and I've found like in my experience where people have had almost like the picture perfect life, so everything's gone to plan and schedule, when something happens to disrupt that, they have no capacity to cope with that because their stability and their framework has come from external things, whether it be a place or a, you know, a structural, whereas, you know, Liam knows that, you know, houses aren't forever. It's just, you know, this is just somewhere that I'm living under at the moment, even if he's not consciously aware of it at his age. But the things that I bring with me every time are, you know, mum and dad and, you know, a few dinosaurs and a few things. And this is, if I've got this, then I'm going to have somewhere to sleep. I can eat. I'm going to have fun and life's going to be okay because it has been at every point. So if in his future things get disrupted for whatever reason, he knows, well, I can come back to this and then we'll figure everything else out from there because the rest of rest of everything is just things. It's just stuff, and stuff comes and goes. And it's probably, you know, a really good place for him to have that. And a lot of kids don't, and a lot of adults have probably never experienced that concept, and that's why they spend so much time filling their life with stuff and things to give them their base and their stability rather than, you know, the relationships around them, because they're all just, you know, it's a house of cards pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can't fill a void. Like that is it. And I think for a lot of people, you know, that idea of security and stability, the only universal language that we really have is money, unfortunately, because it has the ability to transmute its value structure to the values that like that person you know, manages and manifests their life. Like for somebody, money may be the thing that is like, hey, this is economic stability for like me and my family. It's like that is how I build a valuation on money. And somebody else can be like, money for me is cars because like I'm just a single guy and like it doesn't matter. And so like that's the thing that brings me a disproportionate amount of joy and pleasure in my life. So like, whatever. But it is even though it is a universal piece of like objective measurement of like some type of value, it's far less important than all of the things that you can't quantify. And it's, it's the kind of thing that you hear all the time, like a phrase that I love, probably like overuse the shit out of, but like secrets to life are hidden in the cliches. And it's like, all you need is love.
Yeah. And
man, that's pretty hard to like talk yourself out of if you have the good fortune of having the ability to like really be on the other side, like of the haves and have-nots, and you think about all the things that you haven't had in your life and all the things that you have had. What is the one thing that in the past you haven't had that when you do have it, its value lives above anything and everything else? And at least like for me in my life, it's like love.
And
love
I think
in a piece of like that is just like attention is the currency of love in a lot of ways for me, because like I didn't get that attention that I needed early on.
And I think I can relate to a lot of that as well. And having gone through a process where I know I was actively filling voids with my obsession with the latest nanos and shoes and filling it with the gym and the latest thing, and I thought I didn't realize until I looked back and did the work and realized I was just filling gaps with things, because you have that momentary dopamine hit going, oh, these are cool. And you get that moment, go, oh, well, I'm the first one to get these. That's great. And then you wear the shoes for a day and you're like, oh, well, no one really cares about the shoes now. Okay, move on to the next, the next and the next. And then, when I changed my relationship and got to a place where it was, you realize it's about the person and the feelings that you have, not you don't need stuff. It's like I have a very uncomplicated life now where I have, I don't need to go and buy something to scratch an itch and fill it, because you get that attention, you get that you are seen and you are heard. And it's when you get that, when you haven't had it, you're like, oh. And then it feels weird at first, but then you're like, oh, this is what other people do. This is cool. This is how it's meant to be. And because it just fits like a comfortable shoe. But you don't feel the need to add other things to that, because that's enough. That's,
like that's, we talked like last week about a lot of times like your strengths become your weaknesses, and like the benefit is the detriment and the dose is the poison. And like, I have enough, I really as a person do deliberately work on trying to cultivate like awareness. And like now I feel like I've got that pretty dialed in. Now what I'm working on is like doing something with that awareness. And it's like, it's one thing to know your bullshit. It's another thing to like actually step up and do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's, that's kind of like a crossroads that I'm at as like a husband, a father, like a man, personally, professionally. Dude, I am so unbelievably happy and fulfilled as a husband and father that I don't want to do anything else. But that's not really an option.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to pay the bills necessarily, but I understand what you're saying is that, even if you had nothing else, if you've got, Vanessa and Liam and you go, that's enough. That would fill my cup every day. That would be enough.
Yeah. And then like at this stage in my life, and this is not the case for them, nor would it be fair to them, but like I could live out in nature with them in Homestead and just like I'd be as happy as could be.
Yeah. And
but that's not what they deserve, nor is it what they want. And so like that's kind of the place that I'm at, is like, what is that balance? Especially if you do have like some tendencies to trend towards like people pleasing behavior and like, being able to minimize yourself and being able to be the one that willingly takes on the pain and the suffering, because for a long time, like that was the superpower, was that like, well, I might not be the smartest and I might not be the most skilled, and I certainly don't have the most like resources or the biggest network to pull from, but like, man, you're gonna have a bad day if you want to outsuffer me.
Yep.
And at this point, like it's the thing that the suffering would be attached to now is taking away time and energy from my family. And that has become a really difficult set of negotiations for me to have with myself in my head. Like you'd mentioned, like before, the hourly rate that somebody would have to pay me if it was weighing like 1 hour of fort building with Liam versus an hour of doing something else, and it was like, you know, this Wednesday at 4:30 you can do A or you can do B. Be like, man, you better have a lot of commas and zeros in that bank account to the left of the decimal, like for us to get into an appropriate valuation of this. Because like in those moments where my identity is like father, and that is the thing that matters more to me than anything else, because I've been on the other side of not having that in the way that I needed, and I knew that like everything else didn't matter, and I was still like at heart a very broken, sad, scared child, regardless of where I was in my life. And like I don't know how to make sense of creating a valuation structure around this.
And it would be very easy. I don't have to. No, and it would be very easy. Like, and I've seen, you know, I mean, admittedly not up front, but just through your socials, but it'd be very easy where you've come from a situation where you haven't had that attention is to overcompensate when it comes to Liam and just basically just, I'm going to give you the planet. But that is a known, aware struggle. Yeah, but you know, I look at the life lessons you taught him when he you know, you helped him start his lemonade stand, which in winter was a hot chocolate stand. Like, you know, here, you want something? We're going to teach you how to get it. And he got his own money. He went and bought his own dinosaur that he wanted, which was one of the coolest clips I've seen. This is what I want, and he got it for himself. It's not like, yeah, cool, I can get you whatever you want, but it's more important to the quality time that you and Vanessa had with him in building that little cart and teaching him about it and watching you make the lemonade with him and the hot chocolate and come up with the concepts with him and, you know, affiliated him into his first little business project. But just watching those dynamics, but also not only as he got life lessons out of that, he's going to, when he has kids one day, is going to have, you know, he won't think about the lessons he learned. He'll think about the time that was spent. And yeah, I earned this toy and all of that. And it means more rather than just being handed that. It's like, yeah, I got this toy. I'm going to play with it for a week and then ditch it. No, this is a toy I earned and I did it with this, but this was also a fun, positive experience rather than you need to do chores to make money to go and buy whatever you want. It was, you know, just watching you guys interact and, you know, Vanessa doing stuff with it and you with, you know, very cool stuff and made it fun and play-based for him, but also gave him life lessons, and you didn't give in to the, I'll just give him whatever he wants because I don't want him to miss out like I missed out.
We still do far more of that than we should, and we know it, and we talk about it, and it is a really interesting, like, mind fuck to be, you know, a couple who are both, like, very introspective, who strive to be very self-aware, who really are genuinely on a regular basis, deliberately and intentionally, like, trying to be better people, trying to be better as spouses, trying to be better as parents, when, like, you reach those crazy paradoxes. Where, like, you know, I grew up I won't say that we were poor, but we weren't not poor, right? Like, I feel like by the time, like, your mom's cutting your hair and, like, you get free lunch at school and all that, like, all right. So, like,
it's heading there.
It could be much worse, though. You know, it wasn't, like, poverty, but, like, yeah, we didn't have a lot of financial means or resources. And, like, that created a lot of issues for me. Like, a lot of shame around our place in life. A lot of guilt when I did want a thing, especially if it was a thing that, like, we couldn't afford, and a lot of, you know, you understand social circumstance and tribal dynamics, and, like, you don't want to be the fucking odd man out. Yeah. And so it becomes very easy to not know where you build those lines in the sand. When you're like, hey, you know what? Like, we've got the money. You want the thing. I want to give you the thing because I get a dopamine hit from watching your dopamine hit, and, like, fuck it, why not? But you're like, well, where do we draw the line? Yeah. And that's hard to know. Yeah. And it's even interesting to watch for Liam, and you're like, you know, right, like, I could just, you know, give you the thing, you could get the dopamine hit, you play with it for a week and forget about it, but, like, man, he is his father's son, so it's like he'll build a business and make the money and buy the thing, and then he's like, what are we doing next?
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, that's really wild to watch. Like, that's super wild to watch. You're like, even at 4 years old, like, you have a lot of the same, like, character defects that, like, I'm still trying to figure out. But, like, so long as I can guide you to be a better version of yourself than I was able to be of myself, then, like, kudos to both of us.
Those lessons and the journeys and the roads you've traveled put you in a fantastic place to help guide him on his, journeys and help him be a better version by, you're not necessarily going to stop him making his own mistakes because he needs to, but you're kind of going to be like the bumpers on the side of the bowling alley. It's like, you're gonna go off course, but I'm going to be here to help you bounce back because I got off course. I didn't have anyone to help me bounce back, and I bounced myself, so I can help you get back quicker. And just kind of like watching the process and, the relationship that you build with him and be able to have, like you said, with you and Vanessa both being quite introspective people and trying to always be better. And I have no doubt that you will have similar conversations with him that you guys have about life and being humans. And, he's going to learn from that and understand that.
Have those conversations. We already have those conversations. Yeah, right? And they're so far over his head.
I just want to play with my dinosaurs.
Right? We're way over talking it, but man, if I've got to pick one side of the continuum to err on, that is the one that leaves me sleeping much better at night.
Yeah, and he's gonna, understand those concepts a lot more and know that, when he does, fuck things up, which we all do, that you're not going to come at him from a place of, well, you've fallen from the peak now, boy. Like, what's, it's like, cool, let's walk forward together. And I think that that's a really powerful thing for him to have. And to have those lessons and be okay.
This is probably, this is interesting for us to talk about. So, like, knowing what I know about you and you knowing what you know about me, like, we've had more than a baker's dozen of unfortunate circumstances that we have either had placed upon us or that we have put ourselves in, right? There have been no shortage of failures, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the resiliency and the ability to bounce back it exists and it's there. And like the awareness of those two things, right? You're like, yeah, failing is not really like that big of a deal because the show goes on, unless you die, then like whatever.
There's always tomorrow.
Go. And so like, why is it that fear still ends up being such a powerful emotion of limitation, even for people like us that have conversations like these, that believe these things to be true? Or I'm like, failure doesn't bother me. I have failed more times than most people have ever even tried. Like, I'm good. It took me a long time to not have a formative, like, major core piece of my belief system about myself as a failure. Like, I believed myself to be a failure for a very, very, very long time, and I still fight with that. But like, failing forward is the condition necessary for growth. We fail at the margins of our experience. We continually need to like meet more experiences that we can flounder and fail in so that we can build capacity to move forward. So fear is like this bullshit construct, and I have no idea why it's so powerful. And I think that's one of those pieces of our evolution hasn't caught up to like our social and technological evolution.
No.
Like genomes move slow, homie.
Yeah,
but computer chips don't. So like Instagram is still a bitch, but like I don't know.
And that's the thing, you're suffering fear and anxiety, and you're stressed and overwhelmed, but your body still thinks it's because there's a saber-toothed tiger coming, not just because I couldn't. Someone put a comment on my Instagram or whatever. I couldn't get it in my emails or whatever, and it's just that it hasn't quite flicked that switch yet. That the stresses I face now aren't necessarily life-threatening, but, we can still be too afraid to do things and be okay with, well, I know myself through my life experiences that if I learnt to be very self-reliant from a very early age, that no one was going to save me. So I now know in life, if I fuck something up, I can fix it or I can move on from it and it's going to be okay. Like eventually, it might not feel okay at the time, but it's going to get there. And I remember as a kid, I used to play in a lot of golf tournaments as juniors and stuff, and my mother never came with me. Like I think she once saw me play golf when I was about 9, and that's like 40 odd years ago. And I used to watch these parents, caddying for their kids and carting their stuff around, and I'd just be, I would have put myself on a bus at midnight to get there and carted all my own shit, and then I used to be envious of that, and then I realized that I went away to some event or something, and these kids couldn't even cut their own bloody oranges, and I was like, all of that time that I was envious and I watched these parents running after the kids, I realized how much independence and resilience that gave me as an adult to be completely self-directed in things. And if I wanted to get somewhere, I could get myself there, no drama. And what I looked at the time as a loss, and I was envious of it, later in life when you reflect, it's like, well, no, that meant that I could do all these things that I do now and be okay with it, because no one was going to come running after me and saving me. And I learned that, it was all okay.
Yeah, like similar stuff in different contexts. And like the two things that like I still kind of grapple with out of that is some of my most productive pieces in my life have been driven out of a very dark sense of like motivation. And like, that's what I was thinking about as you're kind of recanting the story. Like I would venture to guess that the stories and the dialogue that went through your head in those tournaments, like, fuck these kids, these soft ass bitches out here with their fucking parents. Like I got this on my own. Like I'm a fucking wolf. They're sheep. Like I'll fuck them up. And then so like at what point does the negative motivation structure, like, because sometimes it's super powerful and sometimes it's very, very necessary, but like that is a thing that certainly can become a huge issue. And the other piece of it is like self-reliance is crazy important. One of the most important and valuable skills, like I would go as far as saying, is the reductionism of personal and individual responsibility, autonomy, is potentially the thing that will be like the downfall of humans as a species.
Yeah.
Like, unless we can take care of ourselves, we don't have the ability to interact in partnerships or teams or groups or tribes or societies. Like you got to get your shit together. But at some point, like there's only so much that any one individual can do. And I think a lot of us that built a huge amount of self-reliance early on, we end up in really difficult places later in life, especially if the thing that we choose to pursue is like entrepreneurship or business related. Like, dude, you cannot carry all of the balls all the way down by yourself. And you're like, fuck you, try me, I'll figure it out. And like, you just end up this like task saturated, burned out, overwhelmed, like shithead.
Yeah.
It's just everything. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I had more clarity on what a more defined line in the sand is for a lot of the things that we're talking about. I think that maybe that's like what I need to realize is like you can't stop looking for the answer to like figure out, like the justification for stealing, right? Like when you're going through some type of like philosophy or debate, you're looking at like differences in constructs of ethics and morals. And you're like, well, stealing is inherently like stealing is wrong. But if you're stealing from somebody that has excess in order to like give it to somebody that has nothing, like, is it still wrong? And you're like, well, I mean, both yes and no. Shit. And those contradictions and paradoxes, they most certainly exist, probably even more so in areas of like personal growth, development, frameworks to view the world than they really even do in like actual actionable situations. And that's like hard shit to have to figure out.
It is, and there's no clear lines, and we just need to have the good people around us to be our bumpers, I guess, as we navigate that stuff and go too far to the left, too far to the right. Let's but keep rolling forward. I will tell you that
like having a kid is a really interesting way to like move through some of that stuff and also be exposed to your own shadows and blind spots in your own thinking. Right? And a lot of like what we've gone through and kind of like that idea of demonstration of mastery is the ability to teach someone else in effective packaging of information for coaching should probably operate on the level of like, could you teach it to an 8-year-old?
Yeah.
But like when a 4-year-old asks you like some real like, truth of the universe kind of question from his car seat in the back, and you're like, I'd never even really thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But to also be in a place where like I can very comfortably open the house and be like, dude, like I don't know, like that's a good thing for us to talk about. Like let's sit down with you and me and mom and we can kind of talk through these things. Like what happened that made you think about this, or like where is this question coming from? What do you think the answer is without us giving you an answer in advance? Or like, how does this make sense to you? What do you think about this? Or how do you feel about it? Rather than like, well, do you like it? Like, do you like it? Like, that's shitty. But like, how do you feel about it? That's better. And so I don't know that I have like a great punchline in this, or it's really going anywhere besides like more just rambling tangents. But yeah, for a lot of the large areas that are struggling to wrap your head around as a human, if you can frame it as trying to have it as a conversation with a 4-year-old, you are very much so like distilled down to like just really, really basic pieces of knowledge and experience are overrated. And I know that sounds like the craziest shit ever for somebody that like lives in those worlds. I know we got to jump off in a second, but like knowledge and experience are overrated because they're just like fashion. They become outdated, they become unworkable. Like, well, if your experience and your knowledge, like if something changes or if the experience builds a bunch of limitations, like, well, fuck me, right? So like all you really have at the end of the day are principles. And so I guess that's really it, is like, as we explore these conversations, it's probably trying to distill down in some of these bigger things, like what are the principles that really guide these different areas? And so going to like, the intent of this whole episode, like, me as a father, like what are the principles of fatherhood that I find to be the most important, the most valuable? That's probably what I really need to do. It's just like in a principled way, look at, in a way that a 4-year-old could understand, what are the things that I am unwavering and unquestioning in what it means to be a father and in executing that well. So that gives me something good to meditate on.
That's something good to think on, and it's probably that's actually a really good note, to end this one on, is that thought is, and I'm sure that's something we're gonna dig into anyway as we go through this process of conversations with you, and the messages that you want to leave and put out there. So thank you for today. Your honesty has been amazing, and I can just see, and any blind Freddie can see what it means to you when you just even look from 100,000 miles away through the lens of a social media. Like your face lights up when you talk about him, and when you see him, and the way that you and Vanessa are together on your Instagrams is like it's very cool, and couple goals. But you guys are, as a family, I've seen some very amazing, cool things that you do. So I'm honored to be even a spectator, I guess, in your life, but to be able to have these conversations with you, it's very cool. So thank you, sir, and we will
grateful to have you.
We will talk again soon, I'm sure.
Well, literally, we will talk again soon.
Yeah, literally in an hour.